SAROS is a fun action roguelike, third-person, bullet hell, insert your search tag shooter, and while I enjoyed my time playing it, I have to say it's kind of superficial, and I wish it had more depth both in terms of its lore and gameplay mechanics. As a shooter, it had a pretty respectable campaign time of about 24 hours for me, but as a roguelike, there isn't enough variety in the core gameplay loop to keep me coming back. After 50 hours, I managed to level up all the weapons for the lore and collect all the audio and text logs hidden throughout the world, but it ended up feeling like a bit of a tedious grind, unfortunately. There's definitely things that could have been done to improve the experience that I'll get to later. If you enjoy these kinds of reviews though, let me know with a like, comment, or subscribe, and with that out of the way, let's dive in. In many ways, it's kind of difficult talking about SAROS in the context of a review because many of its issues won't really become apparent until after you've beaten the game, and what issues it does have during the campaign can be overlooked for the sake of progression, though the story is deliberately choppy and feels like it wants to copy from the formulas of Metroid and From Software without truly understanding what makes those worlds so compelling. Although SAROS' gunplay and shield mechanics are quite good and can be very satisfying, there's a caveat to that, and that some weapons are too situational for their own good, such as the short-range shotguns, and you're at the mercy of RNG for the kinds of weapons you'll pick up. That should be somewhat expected for a roguelike, but unlike other shooters in the genre, you're locked to having one primary weapon at a time, so if you happen to select something like a shotgun at an inopportune time, you can really be handicapping yourself without knowing it. This can end up making amazing weapons feel like they're hot garbage if they don't fit the content you're currently facing, and what's worse, they end up diluting the drop pool of weapons as well, making it harder to get a weapon you actually want. This makes it so that you can have really long stretches of a run where you're not getting any weapon upgrades, which on one hand can help build tension as the player has to rely more on their individual skill to clear an area, but it can make enemies feel more like damage sponges as well. There is a Carcosan mod which allegedly allows you to find more weapons of a similar type to the one you're wielding, but based on my runs where I was trying to level up a specific weapon type, I'm not sure it even works. Instead, I think it would have been much nicer to be able to block certain weapons from showing up at all. Another issue which ties into only being able to carry one weapon at a time is that for every time you venture back into the world of Carcosa, you'll be carrying the same weapon type that you ended your last run with. Because of this, it's in the player's interest to try to end a run with their favorite weapon type so that they can start a new run with that weapon. This further disincentivizes people from making weapon swaps and compounds the issue of not finding enough upgrades per campaign run. The annoying thing about this is that even though I think it sounds silly complaining about these things because they seem so trivial, when you're playing a roguelike, each little nuisance will begin to stick out more and more when you're playing the same content over and over. And this leads into my next point. Considering that SAROS is supposed to be a roguelike of sorts, it doesn't have enough systems to alter the gameplay loop in meaningful ways to keep the game feeling fresh or dynamic for hundreds or even tens of hours. What I mean by that is although there are a number of different weapons you can choose from which can slightly change the feel of the game, SAROS will almost always feel like a generic run-and-gun shooter, and you can't tailor your experience to alter that basic gameplay feel. I realize this is still a little vague, so to be clearer about what I mean, when you consider a game like Vampire Survivors or Hades, the power of their boons are such that they can alter the style of your gameplay via increasing the area or speed of your attacks, reducing cooldowns and improving dashes, conjuring projectiles at the end of your dashes, and so on and so forth. These can make individual runs feel very different from each other, and when SAROS gets this right, such as when you're able to chain stagger enemies into powerful melee hits and getting a weapon that staggers enemies faster to kick off that chain, it can feel pretty great. But it always feels pretty incidental, and you can't really specialize for it much. It'd have been cooler if there were ways to focus on more dodge-centric playthroughs of the campaign, as well as ways to beef up your shield, weapons, movement speed, or parries, but the gameplay is just serviceable enough to make asking for these types of changes sound kind of nitpicky, and I'm afraid that's going to be kind of the running theme of this review. As an enjoyer of challenging yet tough but fair games, there's a lot to like about SAROS with its plethora of difficulty settings, but there's also some pretty questionable design decisions relating to them that won't stand out that much and make it look like you're missing the forest for the trees if you complain about them. For example, when I saw the Carcosan modifier that effectively removes the bonuses from the passive tree, I got excited, thinking I'd be able to do a full run of the campaign from square one. This is sort of true in a way, but there are some progression gates that force the player to go back to the hub world, so you can't play through each level consecutively into the endgame. Is this really a big deal? Well, no, but it's one of those small things that would have made me enjoy the game that much more. Setting that aside, I kind of don't get the way they implemented Carcosan modifiers. While they're meant to adjust the difficulty of the game, which I appreciate greatly, There's kind of no reason to not make the game as easy as possible unless you want a more vanilla experience by not messing around with the mods too much, or if you want to deliberately make the game harder. Unfortunately, there really isn't any more reward for making the game more difficult, and to make matters worse, it actively slows down your progression in obtaining data for your weapons, which is counterintuitive as hell. I was under the impression that weapon progression was tied to how much you actually use them, but it's tied entirely to enemies killed, so players are actually incentivized to make them as weak as possible. Thus, if you're trying to grind efficiently, you kind of wind up making the game more boring by having enemies become complete pushovers, which is a bit of a shame. Maybe this will be adjusted in the future, but by the time I'd finished collecting my weapon lore, I couldn't be bothered trying to collect all the bits of Halcyon upgrades I'd been missing, and I felt kind of burnt out playing after only 50 hours or so. That's not a terrible number for your average single-player game, but it seems pretty damn low for a roguelike, especially when the first 24 hours are spent trying to clear the main story. One of the parts which pleasantly surprised me the most about SAROS were the parts spent parkouring through the stage and mitigating obstacles placed along the path. I enjoyed timing my movement through trap-filled sections more than I was expecting, and although there were a few hiccups here and there, platforming was pretty fun. By the same token, however, most of these parkour sections felt a little on the easy side, especially for the endgame, and some of the traps could have been tutorialized a bit better because I'm the idiot who didn't realize he'd be able to simply punch red trap orbs out of the way until after he'd already beaten the game. Now, for the stage design in general, I enjoyed it quite a bit, but like almost everything else in the game, it can get a bit grating the more and more you play. For instance, some sections of a stage can be completely skipped and certain bosses can be fought early, which is fantastic. But on the other hand, certain stages have really long linear side paths that can't be skipped when you're playing a level. I don't mind that these sections are mandatory for the story, but they can end up feeling really fillery if you're just trying to fill out some of your missing boss info. I honestly don't know if this is a good or a bad thing since I have mixed feelings about it, but I also noticed there's a lot of dead space in some of the levels, partially due to the RNG of enemy spawn placements, and it can make traversing these levels a little agonizing if you need to rerun one over and over to find your last bits of missing lore. And while having this kind of dead space can sound like a bad thing on repeated playthroughs when your character is going to be overpowered, I think it may actually serve a good purpose in allowing players to mentally reset after intense combat encounters and give them a chance to settle back down. In some ways, these kinds of design decisions end up with SAROS cannibalizing itself the more it's played. When you first play through the game, there will be items you can't reach because you don't have the required upgrades to reach them, which can be both inspiring and frustrating, but if you do come back to collect these items later, quite often the tension of traversing through the stage will be gone. One of the worst ways the game cannibalizes itself is how it ends up treating yellow crates. When you're first going through the campaign and investing points into your skill tree, you'll be incentivized to collect keys which will be able to open yellow crates and lock doors, which can grant the player upgrades, so there's a lot of incentive to buy into them. By the end of the game, however, you'll be able to get an upgrade where you can just break open the yellow crates for their contents, making keys nearly obsolete as a resource. The irony in all this is that when you're at the point of being able to break these boxes open, your character will already be so powerful from the passive tree that they won't even matter that much. I guess you could see it as a bit of a win more victory mechanic, but it just feels very at odds with the idea of the genre to me. At the end of the day, I think SAROS is a gorgeous game that's fun to play, but the more I play it, the more its flaws keep exposing themselves to me. It's a bit sad because I think this is a game with a ton of potential, but it just needs a bit more refining and fleshing out from its controls, its level design, weapon balancing, and story. The way that I rate games is based on a bell curve, with a 10 being an impossibly perfect game that I don't think can be improved in any way, and a 5 being an average, fun, enjoyable game bordering on something like a guilty pleasure. 4s and below are reserved for games that are flawed or actively predatory toward the player, and 6s and above are for games that progressively stand a cut above the rest. With this in mind, I'd give SAROS a 6 out of 10. More content in the form of a DLC, a boss rush gauntlet, or general weapon balancing and control improvements for things like alt-firing could easily push this game to a 7, but for now, SAROS feels a bit too shallow like the shores of Carcosa for me. With this game also releasing at the price point of $70, I'd suggest waiting for a sale if you wanted to check it out. That'll be it for me. I hope you enjoyed the review. Please consider liking and subscribing, and if there's anything you agreed or disagreed with, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll catch you on the next one. Special shout out to all my patrons and channel members for your support and motivating me to continue working on projects like this one. I appreciate it. Until next time, take care, stay safe. Last Protagonist out.